I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd hide text messages, silence her phone when someone walked into the room, or smile too hard at someone who wasn't her husband. But it didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly, like fog rolling over a familiar road. I've been married to Rajiv for over 20 years. We met in college. He was confident, funny, always full of opinions. We were inseparable. We built a life, a house, a son, and then we drifted. There wasn't a single fight or moment that broke us. Just time, work, routine. Rajiv got busier. He'd come home late, scroll through his phone, eat dinner in silence. I stopped waiting up for him. I stopped asking him to talk. I told myself it was normal. That long marriages settle, that love just becomes quieter, but it wasn't love, it was absence. I started to feel invisible, especially after our son, Arav, turned 16. He had his world now, school, friends, guitar. I had chores, a job I didn't care about, a husband who barely noticed if I changed my hair or cried in the bathroom. That's when he came in, Mr. Suresh, Arav's guitar teacher. He was in his 50s, widowed. Kind eyes. We'd often exchange small talk when I dropped Arav off. Then it turned into tea, then long chats. Then books we'd recommend to each other. We never touched, never flirted, but I began to feel something. He asked me how I was, and waited for the answer. Once I told him about how Rajiv hadn't hugged me in weeks. He said, "That's not fair to your heart." I still remember those exact words. That night I couldn't sleep. I began to need those conversations. I'd linger at the studio. I'd plan grocery runs near his place. My heart would race before I saw him. He'd send songs to me late at night, ones he thought I'd like. And I did. I liked everything he did. The worst part, I justified it. We haven't done anything wrong. I told myself this over and over, but deep down, I knew I was hiding, deleting messages, turning my screen down when Rajiv sat beside me. I knew. One evening, Arav said something that froze me. He looked at me after class and said, "Mom, take it easy, you hang around there more than I do." He wasn't joking. His tone was off. He knew something. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough to feel it. That was the moment the illusion broke. I saw myself through his eyes, not as a woman yearning for warmth, but as someone stealing it in the wrong place. That night, I sat in the bathroom and sobbed like I hadn't in years. I ended things with Suresh quietly. I told him we needed to stop talking. He nodded. He knew it too. He never tried to change my mind. Rajiv never found out, not really, but the distance remains. Some things, once stretched, never quite snapped back. Arav never brought it up again, but I saw the shift, a layer of respect, thin but perceptible, peeled away. Lena's marriage to Rajiv began like most love stories that promise forever, full of warmth, laughter, and long conversations that stretched into the night. They were college sweethearts, two people bound by shared dreams and a hunger for life. They built a home from scratch, filled it with memories, shared responsibilities, and eventually the love of their life. Varav, their only son. In those early years, they were a team. Grocery runs felt like mini-dates. Late night dinners were filled with spontaneous dance routines in the kitchen. And the idea of growing old together felt not only possible but inevitable. But time, as it does with many relationships, slowly began to mute the vibrancy that once defined them. Over the years, Lena began to notice the silences between them growing longer and heavier. At first, they were just tired silences, after work, after school functions, after another routine week. Then those silences turned into patterns. Rajiv, who once would light up when she entered the room, now barely lifted his head from his laptop. His work consumed him, or perhaps he allowed it to consume him. He'd come home, plug into his devices, and disappear behind a wall of screens. Conversations became transactional. Did you pay the bill? Is Arav's parent-teacher meeting this week? What's for dinner? The kind of dialogues that could easily exist between roommates, not lovers. The absence wasn't loud. It was subtle. Rajiv didn't mistreat her. There were no insults, no harsh words. But his disinterest stung deeper than any fight could have. The real betrayal wasn't in what he did, but what he no longer did. No questions about her day. No hugs when she looked low. No noticing the details like her changing the curtains or buying a new dress. Lena began to feel like a ghost in her own house. She was functioning, making meals, working part-time, helping Arav with his studies, but emotionally, she was shrinking. Every day she poured out parts of herself, hoping for a trickle of affection in return, and every day she went unnoticed. Even as a mother, she was beginning to feel obsolete. Arav was growing up fast, becoming more independent, spending time with friends, and immersed in his world. Lena had always placed motherhood at the center of her identity, but now even that role seemed to require her less. There were fewer bedtime stories, fewer moments of him running to her with excitement, fewer needs that only a mother could meet. She was proud of his growth, but it amplified her loneliness. There were moments when she would sit in the living room late at night with the television on and wonder how she'd become this invisible woman no one looked at, no one asked about. She tried, subtly at first, to revive something in the marriage, leaving little notes in Rajiv's lunchbox, making his favorite dishes, initiating conversations, but the responses were lukewarm. He was polite, even appreciative at times, but never present. He would thank her distractedly, still glancing at his phone, already mentally checked out. She once suggested they take a weekend away, just the two of them. He said work was too demanding, maybe next month. That month never came. The loneliness became more than an emotion. It became a presence in the house. It sat beside her during dinner, followed her into the shower, whispered in her ear as she lay beside a snoring husband each night. There was no abuse, no betrayal, no scandal, and that made it worse. There was nothing she could point to and say, "This is why I'm unhappy." It was 1,000 tiny disappearances, an erosion of intimacy that left her hollowed out and aching. Lena often questioned herself. Was she being too sensitive? Was this just what long-term marriage looked like? She remembered her mother once saying, after 15 years, love stops feeling like butterflies and starts feeling like commitment. But what if the commitment became too heavy for just one person to carry? What if she didn't want only silence and shared bills? She didn't want drama. She didn't want a different man. She just wanted to be seen, to be listened to matter again. And in that emotional vacuum, her heart became vulnerable. Not because she was reckless, but because she was hungry. Not for passion, not even for romance. Just for someone to really look at her, ask her how she was doing, and mean it. Someone who didn't talk to her out of obligation, but out of genuine interest. That emotional hunger became the crack in the glass through which everything else would later slip in. It started innocently, as most dangerous things do. Lena never planned to find comfort in another man's words, let alone someone connected to her son. Mr. Suresh was just Arav's guitar teacher, a calm and composed man in his early 50s, with a deep voice and the kind of quiet attentiveness that made people feel heard. He ran a modest music studio just a few lanes away, and she'd found him through a local parent WhatsApp group. Arav had always loved music, and Suresh had come highly recommended, not just for his talent, but for his patience. The first few classes were routine. She'd drop Arav off, wait in the car, scroll through her phone, maybe check some emails. But on days when it was too hot or raining, Suresh would invite her to sit in the studio's waiting area, offering her a cup of tea while the lesson went on in the next room. He had a small corner with 2 chairs, a stack of old Reader's Digest magazines, and always some light instrumental music playing in the background. It was peaceful. He'd make passing conversation, ask how her day was, comment on the weather, recommend a book he'd just finished. It was mundane, ordinary, but for someone like Lena, who had been starved of simple attention for years, those little interactions began to mean more than they should have. She didn't realize it at first. It was just refreshing. Someone asking her how she was and waiting for a real answer. Someone noticing if she looked tired or changed her hairstyle. It wasn't flirtation, it was attentiveness. That distinction made it feel safe. For a while, over time, the conversations grew longer. They began to spill past the length of the class. Arav would finish his lesson and come out looking around for her, only to find her deep in discussion with his teacher. Sometimes they spoke about music, sometimes about books, sometimes about marriage. Carefully and abstractly, he would say things like, "You seem like someone who carries a lot but doesn't say much," and it struck her with a strange accuracy. Suresh wasn't charming in the traditional sense, but there was something grounding about him. He looked directly into her eyes when he spoke, never rushed, never distracted. Unlike Rajiv, who often seemed like he was always halfway somewhere else, Suresh was fully present. And that presence became addictive. One evening, when Arav had rescheduled his class, she found herself texting Suresh to confirm it. He replied, adding, "Hope your day went better than yesterday. You seemed low." It stopped her in her tracks. She hadn't even realized he'd noticed, but he had. The conversation that followed didn't feel wrong. It felt comforting. It was about music, then her job, then about how difficult it is to explain loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. He understood, and he didn't offer cliched sympathy or shallow reassurances. He just got it. Lena began to look forward to those moments at the studio. She started dressing up a little more. Nothing obvious, just touches. A nicer top, lipstick after months. It wasn't about attracting him. It was about remembering what it felt like to feel alive, feminine, and appreciated. She hadn't felt those things in years. Eventually, the relationship extended beyond the studio. He began sending her voice notes with music recommendations or random reflections. Once she replied late at night, apologizing for the hour, and he responded, "I don't mind. I like talking to you. You're not like most people." It was the first time in a long time that someone had made her feel special. And though no physical line had been crossed, she knew in her heart something was shifting. When she heard the familiar ping of his messages, her pulse would quicken. She would hide her smile when Rajiv was around. She began deleting the messages, not because they were explicit, but because they were intimate. They were hers, and that made them dangerous. Her emotional world was becoming more entangled with Suresh than she ever intended. She found herself thinking about him during mundane moments, while cooking, driving, folding laundry. She noticed herself mentally rehearsing stories to tell him, saving interesting thoughts for their next conversation, as if he were the person she was coming home to. And it wasn't about escaping her marriage for someone else. It was about finding the emotional mirror she had lost. The scariest part wasn't that she felt something for him. It was that she felt more herself around him than she had in years. That emotional clarity, that sense of being seen without judgment, became something she craved. Not for excitement or rebellion, but for validation and warmth. And though she told herself it was just friendship, the way she began hiding it, protecting it, savoring it, she knew, deep down, that this wasn't just about music lessons anymore.